Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to yet another addition to my One Piece journey. Today we're going to be talking about the Enies lobby arc, and this is another long one, so this is going to be part 1 of 2 for this arc's discussions. With regards to this arc, it's awesome. It is another point in the story where I'm questioning, is this my favorite moment in One Piece? And you know what I'm talking about, and we'll get to that and we'll talk about it big time. It was awesome. Now, I do have some doubts in my mind if I agree that this arc is its own separate arc and not just a continuation of Water 7. It very much seems to me, I talked about this in the last video as well, that Water 7 doesn't really end as much as continues into Enies lobby, and then it just goes on from there in this very insane thriller. So not too convinced that they're separate arcs just yet, but we'll see how it ends and I'll make my decision then. But nonetheless, today we're going to be talking about Enies lobby. The much anticipated Enies lobby, it goes hand in hand with Water 7. Lots of people speak it in the same breath, and I understand why, because it is just as good. If I'm adding them together, who knows, this could easily be the best arc of the series so far. We'll see, again, depends on how it ends. But before we get into that discussion, as always, just so you guys know, if you want to watch the next video, which will be Enies Lobby Part 2, you can do so by pledging to my Patreon and becoming a $5 patron there. You can watch it right now if you do that. If you'd like to follow my read-throughs, where I read every single chapter live on Twitch with chat and with everything, you can follow my Twitch, which is in the description and pinned comment. And you can also join the Discord server. Currently at the moment, One Piece reads are every Sunday, but we do have Hunter x Hunter live chapter reads on every Friday, and once in a while we have One Piece chapter reads after the Hunter x Hunter stuff. So it's always dependent on the week, but I always post details about schedule changes in my Discord server. Alrighty, with all that said, let's get into this video's AJP's comments, of which there were many, and I'm sorry if anyone got cut out, but there were just apparently a ton. I've read the ones that missed out, and so many of them are great, and these are the ones that didn't miss out. The first one's from Kingslayer Koshi, who says, "A major theme that Water 7 carries is the concept of knowing when to let go and accept death as a part of life. Mary has a big component showing this, and Usopp looks as though he is basically going through the stages of grief because he has the most attachment to Mary since he started off his journey on the Mary while everyone else started their journey before or after the Mary had been established. It's painful to watch the fallout between him and Luffy because both have reasons to justify their side of the argument, which makes it a morally gray area which carries massive weight for what follows suit in the aftermath." I'm really glad this comment was highlighted because I talked so much about a lot of themes in Water 7, but I did fail to mention this one. This idea of letting go and knowing that death and things ending is a part of life. I kind of briefly talked about it when I was going through the plot, about what Zoro and Sanji and Chopper were talking about, how sailors get more hardy, but boats wear out. Because that's a primary theme. There is a natural end to things, and that's just how the world is, that's just how things are. The Straw Hats are so beautifully idealistic, but you can't fight the laws of the universe and facts of life. People die, things die. The Mary is as good as a character, and it has reached the end of its life. And so, like it or not, you have to come to terms with that. If you deny that and can't accept that, you are living in a cloud. You will never be able to move forward, and it will negatively affect your relationship with others and your relationship with yourself and your views on life. So I really appreciate Kingslayer bringing that up because it is definitely a prominent idea and continues to be because the Going Mary stuff is not resolved yet. So thank you. Tuvillo says, "Nami breaks her expected character stereotype twice this arc, to great effect. Forget about the money, at least you're safe, and oh thank God, so we can get Robin back if we just fight them," or something along those lines. Both of these lines are very underrated. Nami's character is underrated. Yeah, I don't have much to add to this, but I just love how it kind of encapsulates how far she's come. Like I've said before, Jaya and Skypiea were so subtly good for Nami and her learning to believe and her learning to be courageous and, step up a little bit as a more leader-like figure of the crew. And in this arc, we see how a lot of her values have shifted, not worrying much about the money when it comes to Usopp as much as her brother, and being very joyful that they can get Robin back as long as they beat their enemies. Whereas before, she'd be super scared. So it's interesting, Nami is developing and going through a lot of similar things that Usopp is going through in terms of being a coward, right? But just doing it a lot quicker. And Usopp's arc is a bit more slow and deliberate and scrutinizing and deep. But hers is very well fleshed out, and it's been very gratifying to see her come into prominence in this way. To be confident, to be courageous, and to be brave. Nami's so great. And then there was a couple of comments from El Jaegerbombas and Joining Joyce, both of whom gave me some really interesting background detail about the origins of Water 7 and its inspiration, Venice and Italy, and how that applies to the mask culture within the town, and all sorts of stuff like that. So I'm just going to put those on screen. So thank you very much to both of you, and there were other people as well who mentioned Venice and the cultural references, and I appreciate that. You guys know, if you've been watching this series for a decent while, that I really enjoyed that aspect of One Piece and the setting design and the inspiration, so I always am really glad to have you guys inform me of those things. People in stream, in chat, have been doing the same, and I appreciate it in the comments as well. Thank you very much. Darius Moore says, fun fact about Water 7. After the battle between Luffy and Usopp, Luffy goes 15 chapters without smiling. It's so compelling that Oda added this detail to a character that is designed as carefree and childlike. It's a very relatable moment to the reader, as I'm sure most everyone has had a fight or falling out with a friend, and it's always heartbreaking to go through. While the reader might pick sides and determine who is morally correct in their argument, Oda shows that the emotions of both sides are justified. You don't have to justify the way you feel because you don't control how you feel, only on how you act based on your emotions. It's no coincidence that two of the silliest crew members were pitted against each other in this duel. I can't imagine that any other crew member would have reacted the same way as Usopp in this exact scenario. It's a great moment that doesn't only have large impact on the future of the story, but an impact on the character, which makes the reader wonder how will the world change and if the crew will ever be the same again. Whoa, looks like the sun came in. Sorry about that. But yeah, this is a great way of putting a sentiment that I kind of tried to communicate in my video as well, which is that it really doesn't matter to me, or I imagine a lot of you, when it comes to storytelling, if a character is wrong or right when it comes to a dispute as deeply intimate and layered and human and raw and so centered on character psychology as this. At the end of the day, outside of plot relevance and how things will undoubtedly have to progress eventually, why does it matter who's right or correct? Or what even does that mean? Luffy was correct about the boat. They had to give it up. And so that informs us about the plot. Going forward, Usopp had to let go eventually, and he still hasn't let go, but he will have to eventually. And so that's why it's important to know that Luffy is in the right in that way. But at the end of the day, why does that matter? At the end of the day, to me, I just want to delve into these characters that I love to follow and emotionally invest myself in, and I just want to know where they're coming from and understand them deeper and appreciate the story more and invest myself in the story more. And Oda does a wonderful job at doing just that. I don't think it matters to Oda at all who is right or correct. It doesn't matter in the fight they have that Luffy is right about these things, because both their emotions are understandable, valid, and interesting and engaging. And so that's the crux of the beauty of that conflict throughout Water 7. TM says, Water 7 was when Zoro became my favorite character. Even though he doesn't get a lot of screen time or spotlight, the way he backs up Luffy and keeps his head on straight is exactly what a vice captain should do. Despite being as devastated as anyone, he keeps it together for the sake of his family and the one man he puts above himself. Remember, when Zoro first joined the crew, his terms for joining were that if Luffy were ever to get in the way of his goals, he'll leave him behind. And throughout the story, entirely in the background, that has changed so much as Zoro, arguably the most prideful man in the series, learned to put someone else above him. And the fact that his loyalty comes from pride shows through his actions. He keeps Luffy on track and makes sure Luffy is aware of his burdens because he expects nothing less than that from a man that would be above him. He does care for the crew as a family, but Luffy is the one person who's supposed to be better than him, and Zoro makes sure to hold him to that because he'd accept nothing less as his superior. And TM illustrates something very important here about Zoro, which I totally agree with. Like, I've been mentioning for a while about how I really love the understated nature of Zoro's role throughout all these conflicts and throughout Skypiea as well. You know, he said some underlying stuff with regards to his anxiety and his role in the crew and how he wants to contribute and he needs to get stronger to contribute. We haven't seen that in a while, but it's still bubbling underneath. But here his subtle role is much more of a mediator and a right-hand man. Essentially the same role as a quartermaster, or in some ways. Because what a quartermaster, what a right-hand man, what the second in command, whatever you want to call Zoro should do, is challenge the captain. Challenge him to be the best he can be, because he has a duty to his crew to lead them into the right path, to do the right thing. And so Zoro, by not taking sides, by being neutral, by challenging Luffy, but at the same time acknowledging that it's very, very tough what he's going through and being empathetic in that way, but not shying away from the fact that Luffy, as a captain, has to make difficult decisions. And when it comes to Robin, laying it all out on the line with regards to what their options are, what that will lead to, what certain scenarios mean, not being biased or emotional. He has done amazing as this quartermaster role. I might be saying that wrong. I've only seen black sails when it comes to quartermasters in Pirates of the Caribbean, so I might be saying that wrong. Excuse me if I am, but I'm just going to keep using it because I like it better than right-hand man. But yeah, he's done a great job in this role. He's done so well. He's made Luffy come to grips with what he has to do. He's helped the crew come forward or go forward and progress with regards to their goals. He's helped to encourage them while also not ignoring reality. And he observes and he understands Usopp and he understands Robin, or to an extent, before the reveals happened. And he is just very level-headed, open-minded, and exactly what it needs to be this mediating quartermaster to challenge Luffy, to support him, to bounce ideas off him, and just to essentially make the crew function as well as possible. And this role has come into prominence more recently, so I really like that because I think it's perfect for Zoro's maturation as a character. He isn't just going headfirst into everything, he isn't just thinking about fighting, he has a distinct role here. And while it contributes to his overall goal of being the greatest swordsman, it is very distinct at the same time, and it shows that extra dimensions have been added to his life. I've been talking about how much I love this role for Zoro, but might have been underrating him in the character rankings. We'll see. I'll think about it a bit more. Last couple. Katha B says, many people view Usopp as pathetic and shallow for leaving the crew for the Mary, but forget his life before the Straw Hats came along. Usopp was abandoned by his father and lost his mother at an early age that led to him having abandonment issues, which got heightened arc after arc, reaching its peak during Water 7. This also parallels his character with Robin's, who also had abandonment issues after finding a place to call home among the Straw Hats. It's just that Usopp is his own enemy while Robin's is the world. Really cool parallel and contrast between Usopp and Robin. They very much are in the same or similar spots and feeling that fear of abandonment, and that's a really great aspect to Usopp's character. Again, we have to remember he was abandoned by his father, he was left behind by his mother, not due to her fault obviously. She died and he was left by himself. And so this is not something that you can just easily forget even years later. Just because he's gone on this adventure with new friends and he's learned new things and he's becoming braver and becoming a warrior and everything doesn't mean that he automatically dismissed that trauma that has left him. It hasn't, not at all. And so no doubt these psychological mechanisms arise again here when the idea of abandonment comes up, because throughout the 300 whatever chapters, almost 400 chapters, or I guess prior to Water 7, 320 whatever, Usopp has not really had to come to terms with the idea of being abandoned. He's had some growing anxiety about his role in the crew and needing to be worthy that obviously are interlinked with his abandonment issues and his self-esteem and his overall goal to become brave, and it's all cohesive. It's also human and it all merges together in that way. But this is where I think that aspect, the abandonment aspect, really comes to the forefront. And of course he feels that way. His father left him, his mother died at a very young age. Obviously he would feel this sort of way, and I think it's very natural and actually very astute, very well done of Oda to bring this back into the fore given his upbringing. And then the last message, the last AJP's comment is from Monkeyboy275 Bobo on Iceberg. I always liked him as a character, but on this reread I realized the first time just how much development he actually goes through. I always thought of him as the voice of reason who had to put Frankie in his place. After all, that's what their whole flashback is about. Frankie just builds stuff because he can, while Iceberg thinks building weapons is wrong because you have to take responsibility for your creations, and you can't know what they'll be used for. The events that happen seem to prove him right and leave Frankie guilt-ridden, but actually the truth lies in the middle, and both end up learning from each other. Tom also embodies both those philosophies. He would put his ego aside for the greater good and was able to make compromises to achieve his goals. In order to make the puffing Tom, he didn't hesitate to work with a corrupt government that wants him dead. However, he also did build an incredibly mighty battleship and gave it to a bunch of criminals. And even if he did trust Roger, other people might use it. He pretty much created the weapon that Roger ended up using to conquer the world with. Not really something the old Iceberg would understand. Frankie really isn't the odd one out here. Tom represents Frankie's side just as much as he does Iceberg's. Neither of them is fully right nor fully in the wrong, and both needed each other to grow. I really love their dynamic. I really do as well. I think it's really cool how Frankie and Iceberg are on opposite sides. They have these little ideological duels, and Tom is in the middle in being, I'm using that word a decent amount today, a mediator. and seeing both sides, but nonetheless, I don't think he's directly in the middle. I think that he lends himself more to Iceberg's side a little bit, or sorry, to Frankie's side a little bit, saying have pride in your creations. That whole pride aspect, and how he says he doesn't regret it for a second that he gave it to Goldie Roger, and that just generally, a ship is not good or bad, it's how one uses it, and never be ashamed that you created something magical. That whole element there, and how Frankie reflects on it, and ultimately concludes that he wants to build a ship to sail the whole world, to me, that makes it seem as though Tom leans on Frankie's side, while understanding Iceberg for sure, but I think that Iceberg remains, in my opinion, a bit antithetical to the themes, which is interesting, like I said before, because he is protagonistic, or a side character that is on our side. So yeah, I do think of it a little bit differently when it comes to Tom, but nonetheless, I completely agree with the sentiment. It's a very interesting thematic dynamic that has tons of emotional substance for all the characters, and reaches some really interesting conclusions for each of them. And all three are very substantial characters, all of which I really enjoyed getting to know throughout Water 7, and I hope to continue getting to know them. I know I'll get to know Frankie more, maybe not Tom, but Iceberg, I hope there's more Iceberg. Alright, so that'll do it for all the AJP's comments for this video. These were for Water 7 Part 2, I guess I forgot to mention that, sorry about that. But if you would like your comment to be entered into a pool to be potentially selected for a future AJP segment, just be sure to use the hashtag AJPs in your comment, and it'll be entered into that. So again with Enies Lobby, because this is part 1 of a part 2 video series about an arc, I don't have a ton of conclusions to make. Actually, since, I am hesitant to call the end of Water 7 the end of an arc, I could say this is a complete continuation, and I have even less conclusions to draw, as it all kind of remains in the balance as we wait to see how Oda ends this saga, or arc. This huge Water 7 Enies Lobby arc, if I end up concluding that. We'll see, it's still in the balance. My point is, aside from all the things I've mentioned already, there is just a continuation of a lot of that. We haven't really concluded most of those, partly due to the character threads not being concluded either, but there are some more ideas as well. There's a great emphasis through the flashback for Robin on the importance of history, of the importance of relics and learning from the past to inform us about our future actions. Human records, human history, is deeply, deeply important. To know where we've been, to know our roots as a species, as a society, whatever, and to then make sure we progress past that. And progression is a huge theme of One Piece, as we've talked about before. Noland was a big advocate of progression in Skypiea, and you can't progress without understanding your mistakes from the past and learning from them, and learning about people from the past, and using that to inform yourself. There's something sacred about learning what happened in the past, events that happened, people that walked the earth, and it's just so sad to lose that. And so the sanctity of that, I think, is a huge theme here. And it's been dwelt upon in bits by Robin, but it's definitely got a new complexion here. More weight than ever before. Aside from that, there's just a lot of continuations from Water 7. Power versus intent, pride, bonds between crewmates, life and death, the idea of justice, all that sort of thing. It all continues here, so I'm not going to repeat myself. In terms of cover stories, though, the Baroque reunion continues, and there are some interesting adventures, but ultimately the conclusion that really sticks with me the most is that Sir Crocodile, Mr. 1, Mr. 2 Bon Clay, who is alive, and Mr. 3 are sentenced to go to Impel Down. The rest of the Baroque works are able to escape, but those 4 are sentenced to go to Impel Down, the underwater prison that we got exposition about last time around, the end of Water 7. It's insane how this is going on in the background, because there is no way this isn't going to play a prominent role in the main plot, right? They're going to Impel Down. We're in Enies Lobby, beyond which is Impel Down. There's no way we're not going to clash with them, right? So Sir Crocodile, we could meet him again, the crew could meet him again in Impel Down. Mr. 2, Mr. 1, Mr. 3, it's crazy that this is in the background. Like, cover stories are, at this point, nearly as essential as just reading the main plot, because this is so key. Not just for immersion and the interconnectedness of the world, but this is an essential plot thing that's happening. We are very likely going to go to Impel Down sometime in the future. Maybe not immediately, but eventually, I assume, or else it wouldn't have been introduced in that way, I don't think. And we have these antagonists that we know very well that are there, so that is gigantic. But then if we get into the actual chapters, just to let you guys know, Water 7 Part 1 will encapsulate chapters 375 until chapter 398. And we start with a bang. We start with some amazing stuff, some great stuff for Robin and for Frankie. Because right here, Robin and Frankie have been captured by CP9, they're being taken away on the Puffing Tom. And then Robin and Frankie are conversing, and Robin tells him that Iceberg is alive. And Iceberg is extremely relieved. It's very sweet. It's just generally a beautiful thing to see him that emotional and that grateful that this guy who he so clearly cares about like a brother, despite how they butt heads, that he cares this much. It's great to see it. We knew it, but it's great to see it. But Robin says keep it quiet because they think he's dead. They didn't do their due diligence like I've been saying. And Frankie talks about how he needs to break out of this. This isn't the world that Tom, built, that he sacrificed himself for. And he needs to break out of this. He needs to change things. And then he tells Robin, go back with your crew. They want to see you. You want to be with them. It's so clear. Just do it. And she says, no, I can't put them in danger. And he says some amazing things, a lot of things that I think the audience might be thinking. And he just says, the government thinks your existence is a crime. That's a disgrace. Your existence isn't a crime. Be with the ones you love, the ones you care about. Just existing is not a crime. And it's such a beautiful thing that he says here because it's encapsulating emotionally of that theme we've been talking about. It isn't about the potential one has for danger or destruction or whatever. It's about how it's used. Robin has this insane knowledge about these weapons, the poneglyph stuff, but she is not going to use it for heinous means, and so she is okay. She just existing with this knowledge is not a crime. He's had this lesson imbued in him because of Tom, because of what Tom taught him. And he tells it to Robin, and I think it's something that she really needs to hear. And he's the perfect one to tell her that. I really like it. It was one of my favorite moments of Enies Lobby so far, and it's right in the beginning. In the meantime, the others behind them, the Straw Hats, Kokoro, Yokozuna, everyone who's there, Frankie family, they continue to pursue towards Enies Lobby. And while they do so, Robin, Frankie, and CP9 arrive at Enies Lobby, and it looks spectacular. It is incredible. There are these waterfalls, this island in the middle of it, these gigantic gates with the government crest or shield or whatever you want to call it, emblem behind it. It is so imposing, the gates of justice. It feels like the edge of the world. It feels like the stakes are as such as, this leads to complete death and torture or to the Navy headquarters. It just feels like the edge of the world, the last stand of our characters. This could be a series climax, honestly. In this location, it is fearsome. Then we go into Enies Lobby, where Spandam is talking to CP9, and he says it's the first time in, 5 years that every member has been here, and we get introduced to a couple more members. We see Fukuro, who has an interesting character design, Jabra, and Kumadori, who is got a penchant for seppuku. It's an interesting new energy for CP9 because these characters are decidedly a lot more over the top than what we've seen so far from the other members. Khalifa, Bluno, Lucci, Kaku, they've been cold customers. They've been just straight-laced to the point, this is my job, I'm doing this, I'll kill anyone for this job, and they don't have much in terms of a very expressive, over-the-top, or silly personality. These guys do, which is interesting. It lends a new dimension to CP9, and maybe it could, get them out of their shell a little bit. I say that as if I don't know if it will get them out of their shell. It does. It puts a whole new dimension on CP9, and it makes it so that Lucci is essentially the main one who retains that veneer of coldness, but everyone else kind of gets a bit sillier. Their personalities get opened up a little bit more, and they do get a bit sillier. Except Bluno, I guess. Bluno and Lucci. They're more fun. It's a new dynamic. And then we cut to the Frankie family, who are making their way towards Enies Lobby, and they picked up Sanji and Usopp, who are kind of lagging behind the train on those derailed carts. And the Rocket Man comes into view. We get this awesome spread as everyone's heading towards Enies Lobby, and it's imminent. And Sogeking and Sanji are reunited with the crew because they were picked up by the Frankie family, and they're all together again. And Sogeking introduces himself. Adorable. But everyone except Luffy and Chopper, which is just, again, adorable, is like, oh, that's Usopp. What's he doing? What's he doing here? But Luffy and Chopper are enamored with him. They're like, what an honor to meet you, Sniper King, Sogeking, it's so great to see you. It's beautiful, and those are the two who would believe it, right? Sanji then lets the rest of the crew know that Robin has these problems and this trauma that stops her from being able to reach out to the crew because she gets paralyzed with fear and she wants them to be safe, and everything we talked about last video. She finds it hard to trust and to reach out. And Luffy in the face of that, says that she's a jerk. And that seems very insensitive, but I think he just kind of misunderstood what Sanji was saying, because Nami explains it a bit more, and he understands it a bit more, and then eventually says, it all comes down to this. Robin is going to die if we don't help her. There is no choice here. There is no choice at all. She doesn't want to die, so let's save her. Anything else is a detail or a distraction that we don't need to think about. Let's go. And I love that, because what has Robin been struggling with this whole time? Wanting to live. I've been talking about this for videos and videos, how she's been making incremental progress towards that, and it's alluded to right here, as Luffy says she doesn't want to die, so let's save her. Bit of a precursor to, you know the line. One step past that and she has reason to live, and that's the goal. Save her and let her know that her life is hers to live. Luffy just storms off and says, we'll send them all flying, we'll get her, and Zoro is assuring and saying that, I think he said this to Nami, that don't worry, that stuff is just details, we'll make sure to get her. And Nami has a really interesting look. There's a bit of a smile that shows that she's very fond of this nature of Luffy's, but a little bit of an element to it that may have been concern for his recklessness. I'm not exactly sure. It's a really curious and interesting expression. Don't know exactly what to make of it, but it was really interesting. This was in chapter 376 for anyone curious. And then Paulie comes and he gives a plan. He says, we need to get Robin and Frankie before they go through the gates of justice, because they are lost once that happens. And the only ones who can stop CP9 are the Straw Hats. They're the only ones who can do it. And so we wait 5 minutes and then we launch this full-scale invasion. That's Paulie's plan, and Luffy says okay. And then Enies lobby and the gates of justice come into view for the Straw Hats this time and everyone else, and it again looks amazing, even from their point of view. We'd already seen it, but this new illustration is just beautiful. The art is fantastic. And so immediately when Luffy sees it, he rushes in, forgetting completely about the 5 minutes, as we would expect. And it's really interesting because we get to this deadly place. This place that is so representative and symbolic of corruption, death, leads to torture. It is just this miserable, miserable center of darkness. And Luffy comes and sees the sights and is in awe and is mesmerized by it and wide-eyed and enthusiastic that something like this can exist. The complexion of it is so dark, but he's able to turn it into something wondrous, and that is him in a nutshell. This place that is symbolic as darkness for everyone else doesn't have to be for us. And it's so Luffy. He charges in, he's running through the place, causing all sorts of problems, and he is taking Enies lobby by storm. The others intend to join him in 4 minutes, but right away, within a minute, Luffy is making a mockery of the atmosphere and aura that's built up, this aura of oppressive impressiveness of Enies lobby. That is this government hardcore structure of oppression. Luffy just runs in here and starts making a joke out of it, and he dilutes the atmosphere around it immediately, which is extremely important, not just for this mission here because it'll clearly weaken them, but for the pirate world as a whole. If they see that someone can just step in like this and wreak havoc, even if Luffy is extremely strong, just knowing it's possible, that's huge, and that breaks the image of Enies lobby. It breaks their invincibility, and that is something that actually Spandam astutely looks at. This reputation is essential for their power, their illusion of power, but power belongs to where people think it belongs, right? So they need to maintain this illusion of power. Jopper says, don't worry about it, it's fine, we'll take care of him eventually. But Spandam says, no, we have to stop this, he's making a mockery of us. And he says that because he's very prideful and petty as a person, and it's very well integrated, and it makes sense. But Spandam is actually quite intelligent here in saying, you know, we can't let Enies lobby become this joke. If that happens, our power goes down the drain. So Luffy needs to be stopped ASAP. And the Frankie family and the Gali Law Company and the Straw Hats begin to invade the island as the time passes to the 5 minutes, and they start defeating Marines no problem. It is, you know, it is a full-scale invasion like I've been alluding to. And they make it through some entry gates, and as they're about to breach the main gates, they come up to a couple of giants, Oimo and Kashi. They are gatekeepers for Enies lobby. And then at the same time, Luffy continues his barrage, and we see this amazing spread as he's surrounded by so many men. Like, they say it's literally 10,000 soldiers? Not in the spread, but that are after Luffy. And he's just in the center of them all, taking them all on to protect his friend, to rescue his friend, and to defend his treasure in the pursuit of dreams and freedom and the right to live. And he says, I'm on my own. You guys are in the way, 10,000 soldiers, whatever. Get out of my way. I'm here to get Robin, and no one can stop me. The scale and depth of the illustration here is unreal. The Frankie family are fighting against the giants. They get pegged back a little bit. Eventually they get some momentum back, and Polly breaks through. The Galley Law Company make their progress. The Frankie family continues. There's this really funny interaction where Spandam gets a report from one of his men saying that he's trying to say that there have been 5,000 casualties, but he cuts off the phone transmitter cuts off before he can finish his sentence. So this means that Spandam believes that there have been 5 casualties rather than 500. Sorry, I said 5,000. It was 500. But CP9 starts congregating, and the Straw Hats, the 5 minutes are up. I said earlier that Frankie family and the Galley Law were with the Straw Hats. Now is when the Straw Hats came in with the 5 minutes up here, and they properly invade now. So the CP9 all kind of congregate together, and they talk about the current situation and who's captive and all that's going on with them. And it's a nice summation of what's going on and their mentality towards it, but it's also interesting to see them interact because, kind of like what I alluded to, it's much lighter. And if I'm being completely honest, I kind of thought CP9 were cooler as a group without these extra lighthearted dimensions added to them. Like, I think you can add Fukudo and Jabra, and the third one, his name escapes me. I think you can add these characters, and they can be as silly as you want. They can be completely unchanged, but I would have preferred for the main CP9 members to have retained that sense of seriousness. That's just me. I really like that, and it's not like One Piece is lacking in terms of goofiness and silliness and lightheartedness. I just would have found it really cool in terms of balance and contrast if CP9 as a whole retained that really cold nature, because that's something that I really enjoyed about them through Water 7. And it's kind of dispelled a little bit here. I believe that I've said before, Bluno and Lucci actually are the only two. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Personally, I was a little disappointed that they got a bit more lighthearted. And I know that's very fitting for One Piece, but I think we've gotten to the point in the story at this point where it's fair to, given the subject matter and given the type of character that Lucci is specifically, to expect very dark content. And obviously it's going to be opposed by what we expect from the crew and Luffy and protagonists and the story overall. I wouldn't want One Piece to change into something very dark or cynical, but I think it would have been a cool bit of variability to the style. Essentially, after they congregate, they're talking about their power levels, and there's some interesting fuel for power scaling there. You guys know me, I don't really care too much about that sort of thing, but, you know, interesting enough and important for, I guess, the scale and scope and understanding where each member stands. And then Spandam comes in, and as reward for their mission success in Water 7, gives them 2 devil fruits, which are then fed to Khalifa and Kaku. And this is kind of the precursor to Kaku and Khalifa getting a bit more silly, which is what I was just alluding to. Kumadori is the other member whose name I forgot. Spandam essentially then decides to have his fun with Frankie and Robin and taunt them, and he disrespects Tom's memory, which really upsets Frankie, obviously. And this whole time, he has left his receiver, his snail receiver, off the hook, and he's unable to get any information about what's going on the island because he's too busy being a petty idiot. And at the same time, Luffy continues to head towards the courthouse, where there is a 3-headed opponent, Baskerville, the judge, awaiting. Interesting character. 3 heads which are in conflict with one another. Very over the top, very interesting in character design and concept, and they're pretty cool. The conflict escalates. Baskerville essentially takes charge because Spandam is not answering, and sets these guards to continue to guard the gate. Frankie's family, Galila, Sodomu, and Gamora, they all start charging in as the raid invasion, whatever you want to call it, continues. It's very thrilling. These chapters are just go, 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 just this constant invasion. And I was saying during chat, while I was reading this in chat, I was telling chat that if the anime adaptation pulled this off in terms of making the pacing very frenetic, didn't take their time, just did a bunch of chapters for one episode, it could really be this really hectic, tense, engaging, enthralling thriller of a start to this arc. I don't know, I haven't seen this adaptation, but it could be pulled off really, really well, I think, if it was done in that sort of way. These giants guarding the gate, Oimo and Kashi, they're essentially kind of overpowered in the end. The invasion continues, they gain momentum, but the Straw Hats now have properly set foot on Enies' lobby and are doing what they can, each one individually, to continue this and make their way towards Luffy to ultimately save Robin and Frankie. It's really funny, there's a moment where Nami continues to use her Clima baton, or Clima tact, and she uses it, and she uses this lightning that she wields, but the lightning is not selective, it is very destructive, and there's a lot of friendly fire, and there's this hilariously terrified face from Nami as she runs away from the lightning that she herself initiated, and she yells at Sogeking, going like, "This is a mess, how am I supposed to control this, whatever?" And Sogeking, in a really endearing, adorable, hilarious way, just goes, Usopp says that you're not using it properly. It's really funny, really endearing, just great comedy between those two, who you guys know I love those two together, while not breaking the tone, while keeping it tense and enthralling and engaging, but giving you the sense that the tide is now with the Straw Hats. They have the momentum, which is definitely, like I said, what's needed after Water 7. We hit that low, but now we're ascending. Luffy's fighting the Marines, continuing, and then he realizes that his crew is there, which gives him more confidence, and he smiles, and it's really great. And then there's this lovely moment as the Frankie family and Gali Law are fending off the people who are defending Enies Lobby, the opposition, and Zoro passes by Polly, and Polly says, go ahead, they're their trump card, essentially. And Polly tells Zoro, if you see one of our former comrades, Lucci, Kaku, or Bluno, or Khalifa, if you see them again, tell them that they're fired. And Zoro grins and accepts that, and I love it because there's a great amount of camaraderie and mutual respect between Zoro and Polly. And Polly says, go on, we'll take control of what's going on here, and you go on, we've got a foothold here, we'll hold this. And it's really impressive because this is the stronghold of the Navy, this court that's heavily defended, that has this veneer of impressiveness and oppressiveness, and they are just tearing it apart. And Polly himself didn't believe that it was possible just 10 chapters ago or whatever it was. And now look at him. It's unbelievable the way in which the Straw Hats are able to have people believe in not just their cause, the Straw Hats' cause, but in themselves and what they're capable of. It's just infectious and genuinely very beautiful. So the Straw Hats are charging in. At the same time, Spandam continues to taunt Robin and Frankie as he is wont to do. This horribly petty, very prideful, just pathetic mess of a man who honestly I think is written quite well. I like Spandam in terms of his role in the story. Horrifically unlikable, but exactly what he needs to be. And Robin asks him, why did Aokiji give you the authority for a Buster Call? To which he just blows up, like as if she would dare question him. But then Spandam, in an attempt to wrest the momentum back, taunts Robin once more and says that the Straw Hats will be taken to Impel Down. And Robin pleads, what about our agreement? You said they'd be safe. And it was a semantics thing. A very pirate thing of him to do. This is something that was, that reminded me of Pirates of the Caribbean. The wordplay going on there with Captain Barbossa and Elizabeth in the first movie, if you know what I'm talking about. But what he essentially says is, I said that I'd leave them free on Water 7. Now that they're here on Enies Lobby, it's fair game. And he punches Frankie for good measure. He says that they're powerless in the face of true justice. His idea of true justice is essentially just a total falsity, a farce, a front for which he can achieve his very selfish machinations. So in this arc, not only are there different ideas of justice, but there are different ways in which it's used. It's wielded as a weapon almost. For CP9, for whatever their goals are, even if they may be founded on their ideas of justice, there's still cruelty very deeply ingrained in that. Spandam just makes a total farce of it. And then the Straw Hats and Gali La and their ideas of what justice means are in total contrast. So really great thematic stuff being done here. And I think these chapters really nail home the impact and quality of Spandam. He has this moment where he admires CP9 and he looks at their strength and goes, damn, they're the real deal. And it's really nailed home here. Spandam is really kind of like an anti-Luffy. He's a foil to a lot of characters throughout the series, protagonistic characters. Luffy, Usopp, he's kind of a foil for Lucci as well. CP9 is highly competent, Luffy is highly competent, even Usopp, as he shows throughout this arc, very competent, and Spandam is just not. Whereas Luffy bands people together in admiration and inspiration, Spandam is the opposite. He either threatens people, or people are banded underneath him because they have to be. But no one respects him, no one wants to be there because of him. They all think of him as pathetic, and if anything, he gets in the way of them achieving their goals. He's almost like a stumbling block for people who are allied with him. No one respects him. But Lucci, his leadership speaks for itself. Luffy's leadership bands people together in inspiration, but Spandam is just full of pettiness and pride and ego and no real conviction in anything except self-preservation. And even that is so pathetic. He's a very good pathetic antagonist. Anyways, Blueno goes out after this to meet Luffy, to fight him and defend as Luffy continues his rampage. And he says to Luffy, you've raised a fist against all the nations allied together. I think there were 170. And he says that you're going to face horrific death if you continue along this way. And Luffy says straight up, I don't care. Or he doesn't even say it. He just starts limbering up for the fight that's about to ensue. It's amazing. It's amazing Luffy stuff. He doesn't give a shit what happens to him. He doesn't care what he's doing through whatever sort of gesture he's making in taking on Enies lobby. He's just here to protect his friends. He's just here to protect their dreams, to save them, to provide them with freedom and dreams. And that can never be wrong. And so he will take on all comers. And Blueno once again reiterates the size of the task that Luffy is taking on. And Luffy goes, I know, you guys are pretty amazing. I get it. And we lost. But for some reason, I just can't find it within myself to give up. He doesn't care. He needs his crewmate. And it is so deeply ingrained in him, this desire to save his crewmate, this captain's responsibility, that he cannot let that go, and he will do anything to achieve it. And then so as the Gali Law, Frankie family, the rest of the Straw Hats continue to do their thing, Luffy versus Blueno gets underway, and there's some great illustrations, great spreads, very, again, gritty, rough line work, really well done, simple but efficient. There's this amazing spread as Luffy punches him. Blueno. It's fantastic, the impact here. And Luffy just continuously reiterates, say what you want, tell me what you want, fight me if you want, but I will get Robin back. That's simplicity. Then there's a moment in the field where Sodomu gets very badly injured and essentially just tells everyone, which Chopper translates, go on without me, continue. And it's very, very moving, it's very impactful, and it reminded me immediately, for anyone who's watched Attack on Titan, of Erwin Smith in Season 2. Susume, continue on without me, continue the charge. I drew that conclusion immediately. Of course, it was more impactful in Attack on Titan for me, without question, but still amazing moment. You know, this was written first, obviously, so the parallels were really interesting. And then at the same time, Soga King, Usopp, has mysteriously gone missing. No one knows where he is. And what happens is that he goes to Oimo and Kashi, these giants, and he finds out that they have been working at Enies lobby for 50 years. And they secured this deal for their services to be able to free, quote-unquote free, Broggy and Dory from Impel Down. They think that Broggy and Dory, who are part of their tribe, or whatever you would call it, are imprisoned. And that's what their service is in exchange for. But then Usopp tells them that's a complete lie. We just saw them on Little Garden. They're doing fine. They are thriving. And so we cut away and we see that the Straw Hats and the Frankie family are in some difficulty. And then who charges in to go and help them and back them up? The giants, Oimo and Kashi, allies now with Usopp on their shoulders, charging forward with these giants that he was so inspired by in Little Garden. It's an amazing, captivating, and full circle moment almost for Usopp as he takes charge. He is the entire reason that right now in this moment that the battle tide has swung in their favor, because he was able to speak to the giants that he admired so much and inspire them and be the spearhead, the leadership for them to rally around the same cause. And it all stems from his interest in the giants, his investment in the giants, and this is something that no one else in the story could have done, only him. And I love that, because it continuously shows his value in a part of the story where Usopp finds it difficult to understand his own value to the crew. Oda continuously shows us the ways in which only he can contribute. And that is key. He's not able to see this worth himself, but maybe he'll eventually be able to as he continues to do these things that are of such value to those around him. And the audience, I mean, we see it right away. We've always known that he's been so important to the crew, but seeing it validated in this way, and continue to be, as he is able to grasp this determination and courage, is so gratifying, especially for someone like me who's been enamored with Usopp since Syrup Village. Also, I love the integration to Little Garden and the way that the world government, again, lie and swindle people for their own means, for their own outcomes and goals. So the connection to Little Garden is really cool for the Giants here, and again, the heinousness, if that's a word, of the world government at full display. And again, integration. Oda never forgets even the littler arcs. Little Garden is not anywhere in the arcs that people think of when they think of One Piece, like the most prominent arcs. When I think of One Piece, the big arcs, I think of Arlong Park, I think of Alabasta, I think of this one now, Water 7, Enies Lobby, Skypiea. Little Garden isn't even in the top 10 or so, but Oda never forgets about plot lines and world-building details and characters that are introduced in former arcs, and I really enjoy that because it's all contributory and it's all integrative, and it makes this, again, a living, breathing world. Back with CP9, Kaku and Khalifa are given the devil fruits and they eat them, and we're given some exposition that says that, essentially, if one person eats 2 fruits, it tears them apart. I don't know if that was metaphorical, I don't know if the translation was a bit iffy or something, or if that's literal. Either way, bad things happen if someone eats 2 devil fruits, which is an interesting way to answer something that I've been wondering. Like, what happens if someone tries to get more than one power? Meanwhile, during this exchange, Lucci kind of shows a little bit of a sadistic side, a bit of a chaotic side. He's kind of drinking wine and just going like, eat the fruit, we'll see what happens, it'll be interesting. Which I dig. I dig that side to Lucci. But meanwhile, the Straw Hats continue to charge forward. Gamora, blinded, like damaged in the eyes, continues to push forward as Chopper, tears in his eyes, translates for him and says, we gotta continue doing this for Gamora, or for Sodomu, excuse me. So we go back with Spandam, and he's kind of sitting there, lording over others and the power he's been granted through the Buster Call. And then what he says here is an amazing little line that I'm not sure anyone in the world except me would really find a great amount of value in. But what he says here is, authority itself is a weapon. That is something he says as he's looking at the Buster Call and the influence he now has. And I love this line, because it's one of my favorite in the whole series, and it's said from Spandam, and that's because it links 2 very important themes to the entirety of One Piece. Excuse me, one of them is for the entirety of the series, and the other theme is more specific to Water 7 and Enies Lobby. The first one, which is specific to Water 7 and Enies Lobby, is the weapon theme. Power. Is power inherently bad, and should it not be wielded in spite of intent? That whole thing. And along with that, it links a theme that's been there from the first saga, which is the nature of leadership, which is that rulers cannot be heartless. They will not only will they not gain the hearts of the populace and not be supported and not be loved even, but they'll just be inefficient, ineffective, because in order to be a ruler like that, you have to see the bigger picture, you have to see things from the perspective of the little man, you have to understand the broader perspective from the viewpoints of the people on the ground floor, metaphorically. And just, you need to be supported, and to do that, you need to respect others. You need to show compassion and kindness and heart. So that whole thing, rulers must have a heart. Integrate that with power inherent and the nature of power. So the ways in which these 2 themes are linked is any given ruler has authority. And Spandam says here, it's kind of a weapon. So rulers have this weapon called authority. Now they can wield it badly, heartlessly, and they'll be portrayed as the inefficient, ineffective, horrible people that they are throughout the series. Or it can be wielded properly, heartfelt, with compassion and kindness and perspective and empathy. And then the people who wield it in that way will be rewarded with prosperous kingdoms, an effective reign, people who band around them. And so this authority, which is power, which is this weapon, is not inherently good or bad. What matters is how you wield this weapon called authority. So I love the ways in which those 2 themes are connected in that way. I found it really interesting. Spandam in general, I can just get into some Usopp parallels now that I talked about Luffy before. It was pointed out in chat, which is very true, that he is someone who uses much stronger subordinates and people around him to achieve his goals, and he feels no shame in that. It's just the weapons at his disposal, and he uses them as such. Whereas Usopp feels shame in depending on others. He feels like he shouldn't have to do that. He feels like a burden in that way. There is no heart, there is no wanting to contribute, there is only selfish goals and how can I achieve them. Total contrast to Usopp in that way, total contrast to Luffy, and a contrast to Lucci as well through his empty leadership, whereas Lucci is very much a leader through example. And Big Bizarro from my chat actually also said he's kind of a foil to Robin and Frankie in that he has huge authority with the Buster Call, but doesn't really care about wielding it with any amount of respect. whereas Frankie and Robin have access to huge power, but have learned, or knew in the first place, that what matters is how they wield it. So again, he's a great thematic antithesis in this way. Really, really sound writing from Oda when it comes to Spandam thematically. And Spandam continues to taunt Robin, saying, "Your friends would never have made it, the giants would have crushed them." About that. They've got Usopp. He's then informed that the invasion has reached the center of the island, and things are not going well from their end. They just casually lead this charge, and Yokozuna and the family and Galila and the rest of the Straw Hats, everyone is charging forward in this togetherness as they try to do their best to make it so that we can get to Robin, we can get to Frankie, we can stop CP9. And Yokozuna is defending them from all these this weaponry. And notably, Usopp is the only Straw Hat that has not gone with them forward. He's still with the Giants. And Spandam is finally informed of the casualties, and he goes, "Not 5?" And there's genuine fear as he thinks about Luffy and what's going on. And it's said by this person on the phone with him, "This is a catastrophe. We've never seen anything like this in Enies lobby." And that's what the Straw Hats and these people they band around them have done. They have gone into the world, well, one of the biggest strongholds in the world, just strolled in, trying to save their friend, and wreaked complete havoc, historical havoc. That is their will, their sheer force of will, and need to defend their friends. Spandam panics and calls Baskerville, asks for the status, and Baskerville says, the status is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. And there is destruction everywhere. The courthouse is breached. There is just chaos reigning everywhere. Like I said, I don't know how this was done in the anime, but frenetic pacing, lots of rubble and battles and sound design and explosions and everything. If done well, this could have been such a thrilling start to Enies lobby. With proper music, it could be great. And Frankie's family here essentially says, "Okay, we'll hold it properly right here. You do your best because our hopes rely on you. Please save our brother. Reach Robin and Frankie, save Frankie for us, catch up with Luffy. You are our hope. We are pinning our hopes on you." And the opposition officials are going, "Hey, show respect for this court," to which, led by Zoro, they just cut straight through. There's some funny gags with Zoro right here, which again don't break the tension. As he's kind of getting lost, he doesn't know where he's going. That gag is never not funny for me. And someone notably says about Zoro, "This guy isn't the captain?" Because he's just taken such a great role of leadership here. It boggles the mind that this guy isn't the captain, and if so, who the hell could their captain be? What an impressive figure he must be. Hell yeah. But it's a metaphor for the Straw Hats. There is all this ceremony and pomp and circumstance. You cannot come into this courtroom. This is a sacred place, the sanctity of the courtroom, blah blah blah. They don't care. They cut through all of the nonsense and just get to what really matters, as they have done this entire series. And almost unintentionally, just through being who they are, they sweep people up in their midst, and all their dreams they carry with them. Bluno versus Luffy continues, and it's a pretty hard challenge for Luffy. And just as Bluno is thinking, this is a very difficult opponent, Luffy says straight up, "Yeah, I can't do it. I can't fight you like this." In this state, Luffy doesn't think he can beat him. Very realistic, shows the progression of Luffy and development of him once again. But he says, "That can't be, because I need to defeat you, because I need to get to my friends. There is no other choice. He needs to be strong to protect the people he cares about." And so he comes up with a way to get to higher strength. And so he steams up all this steam around him. Incredibly iconic shot. I can't imagine how it's not. With fist to the ground, steam all around him, as he says, "Gear second." And he says, "You won't be able to keep up with me." And what a moment. What an image. What a great Luffy character moment. And some have asked me, does this feel like an ass pull? I can't say it does, no. I was just hyped, I was just experiencing it and went, holy shit, this is awesome. I can't say I once thought that this was an ass pull. And it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was alluded to, maybe at the beginning of Water 7, maybe arcs previous, where Luffy would kind of allude to things like, I'm trying out a new power, I'm trying to get stronger. He'd say things off at the side like that, and you'd kind of dismiss it and go like, okay, whatever, Luffy's trying to get stronger. And then you'd move on to whatever the plot details were that were more pertinent. But those seem to have had an impact and been important and significant because he was working on this the whole time. Either way, to answer the question, No, the furthest thing from my mind when I was reading this was, this is an asspull, and I'm not going to intentionally look for reasons to try to dislike this, and I don't think if I were to do that, I'd find any, to be clear, but like, why would I want to try to criticize when I don't feel any need to criticize naturally? I don't want to make my enjoyment of this moment go lower. So yeah, amazing moment. I have no problems with it whatsoever, and to the contrary, I think it was awesome. And Luffy says here, I'm glad I ran into you because it's pushed me to get stronger in this way and be able to wield weapons that will allow me to protect my friends. Amazing trope. It's done in Hunter x Hunter, Haikyuu. I'm so grateful to have met you here because it has made me stronger, and it's done earlier in the series as well with Zoro versus Mr. One, as Zoro shows his gratitude for being able to get stronger. And then Luffy is able to overpower Blueno using Soru? I think it's called Soru, one of the 6 CP9 techniques just like that, with no training whatsoever. Or no traditional training, at least. Luffy had observed Blueno and his patterns of movement, and he learned how to counter him just through observing in that way. And there's an amazing spread as Luffy does his final impact, the Jet Bazooka, and Blueno is defeated. But Luffy is extremely tired, exhausted after this, and his body just cannot really keep up. His body kind of gives out on him. But he reminds himself that he has to keep moving for his ultimate goal for Robin, this perseverance. At the same time, Usopp is leading the Giants, this brave warrior of the sea. He has embodied the brave warrior here. And this, I'm sure this doesn't mean that he's gonna automatically be brave all the time. Like I said, this evolution is very gradual, and it's, you know, you gain some and you lose some, and you progress and you regress, and it's very human. And I would actually be disappointed if after this Usopp was 100% brave all the time, because that's just not true to the way that Usopp has been developed so far. But this is nonetheless a huge watershed moment for him. And there will be 1 or 2 more in this arc. Everyone else is continuing to fight to try to get the Straw Hats to get to Franky and Robin. All too often, you know, all these hopes pinned on the Straw Hats. It's crazy how often that happens, but they don't take it as a duty or like a restricting duty. They don't take it as pressure. It's just how they live their life, and they welcome it. Now the Straw Hats continue to progress at a rapid pace, Luffy trying as well, towards Spandam and Robin, and Spandam rushes, trying to drag Robin, trying to get her out the gates as soon as possible just to ensure this victory, because basically as soon as they reach the gates, it's over. And Kokodo has this great little speech as she looks at all the carnage, at all the destruction, at this formerly impressive island, Enies lobby, being completely torn apart. And Kokodo says, excuse me, I gotta read this. She says to Chimney, look, whether they live or whether they die, they've done what no one could do in 100 years. This will impress the whole world. When the fight is over, the world will ring with the sound of that Straw Hat boy's name, as we see Luffy. Beautiful, moving, profound speech. I can't put into words how gripping and moving this was. And we see Luffy as he looks up from the ramparts and he screams to Robin, just screams, bellows, Robin, I've come for you. And I'm getting chills just talking about this. He will always be there. He will always come for anyone who needs him, but especially his Nakama. Monumental moment. I loved Kokodo's speech and how it coalesced with Luffy here. It just nails the poetic and grand scale of this, and this watershed moment in perhaps history, perhaps this era of piracy. It will send shockwaves throughout, no matter the outcome of what happens here, and I imagine the Straw Hats will succeed. But no matter the outcome, they have done something completely permanent that will affect the image of the Navy, of Enies lobby, of piracy as a whole. It's historic, it's monumental, and Robin is notably very surprised that she sees that the Straw Hats have come for her, or maybe that they were able to come for her, and Franky just grins, and I love that for him. I love that from him. It seems like he always had faith that they would, and Robin maybe did as well, but didn't want to believe, because it's hard to give in to that hope when you've been burned so often, and Luffy has come. And this forthright honesty of Luffy's rears itself right here as his stomach rumbles, you know, still very tired from the fight with Blueno, and he eats something and he's like, okay, now I'm good. It's a nice bit of tension dispelling in this moment full of weight and gravitas that, again, shows the momentum for Luffy in this moment, and the Straw Hats here. They have all the momentum. Spandam can't believe that he beat Blueno, and Franky says to Robin, look, just look at this. He says, they've made it this far for you. They've done the unthinkable all for you. And he says, I understand you. I understand that you want to protect your friends, but what Luffy is doing, what this crew is doing, that idiot is special. So accept their help. accept it. Don't be afraid that they'll die. Stop running away. Embrace them back as they embrace you, or they won't be able to save you. And Frankie knows that she needs, wants, desires to be saved. And I love this from Frankie. It's so emotionally intuitive, so understanding. Maybe the best material from him. The best material from Frankie so far has been the flashback stuff, of course, but even more so, actually, the ways in which he's able to confide in Robin and give her this advice and reach out to her. I think Frankie's very significant for everything that happens to Robin in this arc. I don't think she would have been able to do this without him. And then he says, I'm gonna let you see the Straw Hat. And regardless of what happens to him, he grabs her and he takes her and essentially busts out of there to see Luffy. And Robin is standing above them, and Luffy yells to her, and Robin says, go home, I don't want to see you. Why are you saving me? I didn't ask you to. And she says that she wants to die. And this is her insecurities, her lack of hope in the world, in general, in her life, because again, her trauma, she's been burned so many times, and she just wants the Straw Hats to live, and she doesn't want to, she fears being able to have all this happiness. She fears being able to have her cake and eat it too, because she's learned that the world just isn't fair enough for that to be able to happen. So she wants the next best thing, which is them surviving. But like Frankie says, with them, you can hope for all of it. You can grasp it all. But right here, understandably, she says, I want to die. She regresses back to that ideology, to that sentiment, I want to die. But that's an interesting marker from which we'll stick a pin in and come back to in a bit. Because she doesn't actually feel this way, but she feels the need to regress to that. And CP9 just stops and observes this whole thing in interest, and Spandam stops and watches as well, sadistically. He's reveling in this infighting between the Straw Hats and Robin. Luffy and Robin in particular. So all of their allies are continuing to help them to get to Robin, and everything's going along in that direction. Meanwhile, Usopp is on the Giants, which is, again, very cool because he's living out his dream, essentially, or one of his dreams. But then the Giants essentially tell him, you know, your race right here is run. Go with your friends, go with your crew. And so everyone essentially catches up with Robin, Usopp in very comical fashion, but it comes to a point where it's very, very emotional, heartfelt, dramatic. And Luffy talks with Robin, and he goes, do you want to die? And she says yes, repeats herself. And Spandam is just taking all this in as this happens, very sadistic again. And Luffy asks Robin again, do you want to die? This time picking his nose, essentially not taking her answer seriously, because the implication here for me, I think, is that he knows that she doesn't want to die. She's saying all these things and she can't fool him because he knows her to a great degree. She doesn't want to die, she wants to be saved. And so during this exchange, right after it, I should say, the rest of the Straw Hats kind of line up and everyone gets together, like I said, Usopp in pretty comical fashion, and the 6 of them just face Robin. And Luffy says, okay, you know what? If you say you want to die, then say it directly to our faces. We're right here, we're facing you. Say it one more time. And it's this amazing spread. As all of them face Robin, everyone's there, everyone's facing her, and everyone is there to save her, but also listening to her at the same time. Just arms crossed, completely serious, waiting for her answer. All 6 of them standing and facing her to bring her home. And Sogeking, Usopp's face, he's dripping in, I think, tears. Maybe because he kind of crash landed into the place. Maybe because he's crying. Maybe because he's hurt. Maybe a mixture of both, I'm not exactly sure, but it was a nice little detail. All their faces are very determined, and Nami is smiling, which I really love, a nice little detail for her and her confidence and her assuredness here. Zoro's neutral, kind of just observing, calculating, as Zoro has been doing for the past couple arcs. Sanji's grinning, Chopper's determined, Usopp is a goddamn mess, and Luffy is completely steadfast. So this face-off kind of continues, kind of ensues, everything going on around them continues as well, and Frankie looks at this situation and goes, what must this woman have gone through? What is going on here? What kind of burden is she carrying? Now, Spandam gives CP9 the order to take out the whole crew if they approach or reach the Tower of Law, which they're not at yet. And he says that above all that matters is that I'm protected, and he threatens the Buster Call, which then kind of ushers us into the biggest crewmate flashback, the one with the most build-up, the one with the most chapters, just in general, the biggest one in the story so far. And I imagine probably the biggest in the story to date. But not in earnest, not completely, because we only get a flash of it. When he threatens the Buster call, Robin flashes back to just a glimpse of Saul, her crying about Saul. And she says, "Can you see people's lives on a map?" And she says, "Do you know what happens if you press that?" She says, "You know, you've said that O'Hara disappeared from the maps, but can the existence of people's lives be recorded on maps? Can you see people on maps?" And it's so powerful because the O'Hara tragedy, the O'Hara disaster, whatever you want to call it, has been referred to by Spandam, by government officials, by a few people, as O'Hara being wiped off the map. But it fails to take into account the actual lives lost in the event, because they just talk about it as this speck of land that's now gone. But for Robin herself, she knew these people. Good, bad, great interactions with them, horrible interactions with them. She knew them all, and now they are gone. And the almost trivial way that people seem to talk about the O'Hara disaster doesn't take into account the personal nature, the intimate, true human nature of what really occurred on that day. It's incomprehensible the amount of human lives that were lost in the O'Hara tragedy. And then Robin says, "You people only see the world through such devices, which is why you do such heinous things. So incapable of empathy, incapable of compassion or kindness, or seeing things from the ground up or from the ground level. They are just, whether they be intentionally blind or not paying attention to any of these people or these lives that are lost in these tragedies, or whether they're just ignorant, it doesn't matter. Either way, that's the reason that they do such heinous things. And notably, you do such heinous things. That is a line that's very similar to something she said one or two times before. In Skypia, she kills that guy and said, "You do such terrible things," or maybe that wasn't the actual adjective, but she said something to that degree. So she's said this before. And there's an interesting side-eye from Lucci to Robin as she proclaims this, and we get launched into her backstory in earnest now, as we see her as this little girl, 8 years old, 20 years prior, on O'Hara. And it's heartbreaking. She's bullied, she's shunned, she's called a freak, she's called a monster because of her powers, because of her interests, because of her upbringing and her experience. And she looks on at happy families and sees them experiencing or sharing each other's company and experiencing these beautiful things, and she just feels totally lonely. She's been shunned by her family, by her guardians, her aunt who took her in and completely just don't treat her as she should be treated with the common decency that any little girl deserves. She's not treated with respect, she's told to do all these extra chores, she's clearly not loved nearly as much as her, I guess, cousin, and she's just, it's basically a form of abuse. It's extremely sad. I teared up that this 8-year-old is going through all these horrible things. It in itself, this is just a fraction of the backstory, but this in itself explains so much about her character. But then she goes to the island library, where lots of books in this place, and she's greeted with a celebration, with a congratulations. There's a man here named Professor Clover, he's a researcher, and there are a bunch of other researchers as well. Scholars, and they say congratulations to her because she is now, after having passed an exam, an archaeologist at age 8. And it's wonderful. They're validating her experiences and her studies and her passions. And I love that even in spite of, outside of this library, the world being incredibly harsh, that she's able to have this place of solace and sanctuary. And obviously we know this is going to end horribly. But nonetheless, it's hard to not smile at seeing her have this home. It's hard not to smile at people who celebrate her for who she is. And these, needless to say, these are no demons at all. In particular, I really enjoyed the character of Professor Clover, particularly because Professor Clover imparts to Robin the beauty of knowledge, kind of what I was alluding to before, the sanctity of history, that theme of years past and how important that is and how much of a blessing it is to be able to learn from years past. It's absolutely true. I love that theme like I've talked about, for all the reasons that we talked about earlier on in the video. But this tree is not only this sanctuary, it is this haven of knowledge and history, and because of that, a beacon of progression, of learning from history, learning this knowledge and going forward and innovating. Now, he tells Robin to be proud of learning in the way she has and her achievements, and she says that she wants to research the void history, the 100-year void in history where no one knows the specific things that happened here. It's a mystery. But Professor Clover says, no, you cannot do this. It's completely forbidden. Now Robin knows that they've been researching this themselves, and he says, we're doing this knowing that our lives are at risk for doing this. This is completely forbidden. It's illegal. And it really makes you wonder, what are these secrets? Another great plot hook. What happened during the Void Century? Why is all this stuff being covered up? And, this is a bit of a hint to what happens later, but I'll just say it now. The Navy, the world government, they're clearly culpable for some reason about something that happened during this Void Century. So that is a huge hook, and I'm really interested in knowing what it's about. And Roger has been counteracting it, or had been, and Robin has taken up the mantle as well, the torch. It's just really interesting. But yeah, for Robin's safety, for her own safety, Professor Clover says you cannot go to the basement and research these things because, no, we're not going to allow you to do it. They care about her. And she understandably runs away crying, but you understand both her perspective and theirs. And the researchers mention that she's taking after her mother, who is named Olvia and was apparently captured. Robin then finds, after running away crying, this washed-up giant on the beach. This is Saul. And notably, for something so foreign to her, so new, and so what could be scary, she doesn't observe him through that sort of lens of being afraid of the unknown, which is understandable. I wouldn't blame a child at all for being scared at seeing a giant for the first time. But Robin looks at Saul and notices that he is sentient, sapient, intelligent, and deserving of respect, and isn't scared. She is more so curious about him. No fear, this inquisitive scientific mind. And it's really awesome. Saul is a beautifully sensitive giant, a gentle giant, and they bond immediately. And he says, don't lump me in with savages like Elbaf. And he says, don't tell anyone about me. And Robin says, don't worry, you're not that interesting, after having talked to him for a little bit. And he does this laugh. I can't do it for the life of me, but dede she is how it goes. And Robin does the laugh as well, and it's adorable. And Saul says, you should laugh more. It's a pretty laugh. Laughing and smiling makes the world seem just a little bit brighter, and that could help you in all sorts of circumstances. And it's really lovely. Immediately, they strike a great partnership here, and Saul says that there are people looking for him, and that he's kind of on the run a little bit, and so Robin accommodates him. She steals food from the island, she gives it out to him, and she doesn't tell anyone about his whereabouts, and eventually the two start sharing more and more stories. She tells him that one day, 6 years ago, her mom just left because of research, because of work. Olvia, and Robin says that she can't even remember her from that day. She also kind of vents about the researchers not allowing her to do her research. She shows Saul her power, and Saul, just like how she was not scared of him, he's not scared of her power at all. He doesn't think it's freakish or whatever anyone else said. Of course he wouldn't. And like I said, he tells her, try laughing, try smiling in times that are difficult to turn things around. And he says something that's heartbreaking. He says, because you carry a lot of hurt for a kid. Lord knows she does, and Lord knows that continues. And so it's made clear here that Robin recognized the D in Luffy's name because Saul is named Jaguar D. Saul. Also, the cowboy hat comes from Saul, or because of Saul. Now, at the same time, somewhere in East Blue, I believe it was? West Blue, sorry. CP9 are being directed under the charge of Spandine, who is Spandam's dad, who, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. And he gets a call from headquarters, and he's being told to pursue... Now, we know where he's going. But wow, the generations of Spandine, terrorizing Robin. It is almost poetic in a very twisted way. So Saul begins building a raft for himself to go out to sea, and Robin shares a bit more of her mom with him. She says that she was researching the Void Century, and that one day she'll return and she'll be able to explore the sea with her. Now, Saul has a bit of recognition when he hears her say this, and he says, what is your mom's name? She says Olvia, and he knows her. He knows who Olvia is. And he immediately realizes that, holy shit, I am on Ohara. The Navy is headed here right now to completely destroy this place and level it. We have to get away. We have to get you safe. This is not good. And the realization was the darkest thing possible. And just similar to how the researchers put it, he says, don't tell the government that you are a scholar or an archaeologist or a researcher or any of that. Don't tell them that, because they are not below killing a kid for that. They will do anything for their justice. This island is being searched out by the government to destroy all the research they're doing for the Void Century, which is what I alluded to earlier. What is this gigantic conspiracy secret? Now, Saul sends Robin back to town to see what's going on there, if people are okay, and he says that your mother actually might just be coming back. As we see, Olvia does come back, and she tells them the government is coming right now. She's part of an investigative team that departed 6 years ago, as we heard, and she is the only survivor from it. 33 members were there, all but one dead, and they went through the bodies and they realized that they were from O'Hara, and so now they are coming to completely destroy the place, because these secrets cannot be let out. They need every scholar here to be killed. And so she says we have to evacuate. Everyone has to evacuate. And Professor Scholar says, okay, but we are not leaving behind this history. We need to preserve it. We need future generations to understand everything that we have here. Every little bit counts. The sanctity of this knowledge and history. Without it, there is no progression. Without it, we are lost. And Olvia says that she wants to see Robin, even though she has no right to see Robin. And we go even farther back in the flashback where we see a 2-year-old Robin just wailing, crying for her mom. And Olvia gives us a theme as she's saying bye to Robin, saying that she needs to carry forward the wills and spirits of those who have passed away, who have left them. She needs to carry forward their wills and legacies and spirits, and it is a very endearing sort of motivation, along with her motivation being just generally complimentary and beneficial for humanity. And so you can understand why she feels that way, but at the same time, the morals here are a bit dicey. How do you leave your 2-year-old daughter like that? I know there's a duty, but it doesn't take away from the fact that she did what she did, and what she did completely destroyed Robin's childhood. She promised to come back when the mystery was solved, and I don't think that Olvia is a bad person, but you can't help but criticize her for what she's done here, especially seeing what it led to for Robin. And so she's right. She's absolutely right in criticizing herself and saying, I don't know if I deserve to see her. She's just lucky, and Robin's just lucky that while she got taken in by that horrible aunt, Professor Clover and the scholars all were her saving grace and allowed her to open up her imagination and explore the library and discover this passion of hers. And Clover gives her a bit of an update to tell her that Robin's doing just fine, she's doing well, and Olvia is glad to hear that and says, okay, I need to cut ties with her. She cannot be the daughter of a criminal, for obvious reasons. She can't be punished. And she asks everyone, don't mention that I'm related to her. And so she takes her gun and she runs out of the tree and she's going across the island. At the same time, Spandam comes and he is causing complete havoc on the beach, in town, on the island, everywhere. And in the panic, Robin, who is heading back to town, and Olvia go the opposite direction from each other, not seeing each other, not realizing that the person they seek most in the world is right there. It reminded me a lot of the way that it was a beautiful panel, but it reminded me a lot in composition and in terms of some ideas from Alabasta of Vivi and Koza going past each other during the conflict with the rebels attacking the royals. And it's a horribly tragic moment, and meanwhile Saul is very agitated. He's kind of thinking of what to do, and we finally see a bit of backstory for Aokiji, because we knew that he knew Robin, but nothing yet had indicated how or why or the specifics. And we finally see him, and he is named Kuzan, and he's a vice admiral, and we see him on this ship. And he wakes up and hears the news that Spandine has arrived on O'Hara. Very interesting. Vice Admiral Kuzan, who would soon become Admiral Aokiji, right here. So what's the role that he's going to play in this? Robin goes over to the library. She's telling them all about what's going on. They already know, of course, the scholars. And she asks about her mom, and they don't tell her anything because of what Olvia told them, and again, heartbreaking. Now, the Navy bust into the library eventually, and they say that what you've been doing is illegal, submit yourself, you'll be questioned for crimes against the government, and at the same time, all non-scholars are to evacuate. And this is said in the town, this is said in the library and the town, I believe, and people are confused because the scholars of O'Hara are kind of like the celebrated. They're the pride and joy of O'Hara. And Spandine is in town, and Olvia confronts him, and she says this island has nothing to do with anything, she's just trying to defend it, and Spandine says, we'll find the poneglyph eventually. We're gonna tear it from top to bottom to find this. And he says something horrible, which is that they've been trying for years to come up with a plan or come up with the means to make an example of O'Hara for anyone who tries to screw with knowledge of the Void Century, to keep those secrets hidden. And Olvia is essentially taken down by a couple of Navy agents or Navy officers, whatever, and the library starts getting ransacked. And all you can hear you can see from the scholars are these heartbroken cries of, please be careful. This is valuable, important knowledge that we've been preserving. You can't just damage it, you can't destroy it. This is sacred stuff and it's being treated with complete disrespect. Now, Saul understands what's going on and he starts panicking. Everyone gets rounded up in town, the scholars, Olvia, Robin's there as well. The evacuation is continuing for all the non-scholars, and Clover begs Robin, go to the evacuation ship, and she says, no, those people are never nice to me. It's only ever been the scholars. It's just heartbreak after heartbreak. All that she has left, the only part of her life that's been sweet or good or positive at all, everyone is right here. Rounded up, potentially about to be killed. And she doesn't want her life if it's a life without them. She doesn't want to escape with those people. And Spandine at this moment throws down Olvia in front of everyone, and Robin just thinks, why are they hurting that lady? She doesn't even know she's her mother. But Olvia does. She sees Robin and goes, you've grown up beautifully. She thinks this internally. And it's so tragic how they have to meet in this circumstance, one of them completely ignorant. That would change, of course, but in this moment, my god, was I going through it. Now, at this moment, Spandine gets word that they found a poneglyph, like they expected to find one, and he says, this is not good for any of you. You're all gonna die. Very taunting again, like his son. And Robin is heartbroken, going, you're not gonna die, right? It's horrible. And then Clover says, in such a determined way, he says, let me speak to the elders and let me report my findings and explain this significance and importance to them. He's such a minor character, but he's so good at the same time. Clover is great. Now, people continue evacuating. Saul is trying to make his way over to Robin, hoping that it's not too late. People are scared of him. The poneglyph has been discovered and the officials are just looking at it in shock. And the elders in conversation with Clover say, it's a shame, but you broke the laws of the world. Literally just researching and understanding what happened in our world is breaking the law. And that is a secret that cannot be let out. And Clover says, enough of your false pity. It's unfortunate, huh? Enough of that. And he has this great speech. He says that the past belongs to all of humanity, all humans. It's inhumane to keep the past hidden and buried when you have the means to share it. You can't suppress this. This must be done for the future. And the elders essentially say that information is top secret and it can awaken the ancient weapons, and we cannot have anyone alive who has that ability because, of course, they need to wield it for themselves. And they say that even if you don't intend to do anything with that knowledge being out there is dangerous enough to need to snuff it out. Again, the government now portraying that theme of needing to snuff out the potential for danger rather than the intent of using and wielding this power. But Clover, the king that he is, says we must acknowledge the events that happened in the past. We cannot shy away from them. We have to learn from them, improve, and take that into the future and not be scared of the potential for disaster and wield this knowledge in a way that can be productive for humanity. He is like Tom. He is like Frankie. He is on Robin's side of these ideological battles. He plays a very similar role to Tom in this backstory, as Tom did in his backstory, an advocate of intent. They don't intend to use this knowledge for horrible means. They intend to use it in the most productive way possible for humanity. And so why shy away from this knowledge? We need to be able to use it to wield it properly. But then he insinuates, why would you try to cover this up? That would probably mean that there is some sort of enemy, some sort of heinous information here that uncovers some sort of horrible plot about some sort of party. This potential enemy very clearly being the world's government. And again, what are they hiding? And he says there once existed a kingdom that left behind these clues, the poneglyph and everything, that the government wanted to hide. And just as he's about to elaborate more, he's shot. And I thought he died here. He doesn't, thankfully. But it's still a very shocking moment and really indicative of the government's need to silence anyone who would speak up against them. And Robin is crying for Clover as Saul rushes over to her. The Buster call is confirmed. The tree catches fire and all these scholars are heartbroken and doing their best to just salvage and keep any shred of history still alive for future generations. It is such a selfless endeavor, and so admirable and just so heartbreaking. And in the midst of this fire, this devastation, a mother and a daughter are able to finally meet and share an embrace. There's a back and forth before this as Robin says, "Are you my mother?" Recognizing Olvia to an extent. She's crying, and Olvia cannot answer her because it would implicate her, which is so heartbreaking, as Robin just thinks it's nailed in that she was abandoned, and her mother never returned. But within Spandine's earshot, she says that she can read the poneglyphs, and the jig is up at this point. And she says, "Please don't leave me alone," she pleads to Olvia. She just wants this moment at World's End to be with her mother, just one time. Now, regardless of whether people were evacuated, it doesn't matter, it's indiscriminate. The Buster Call hits Enies' lobby, and it is being completely destroyed. And Clover realizes that they intended to do this regardless of what happened. Now, Spandine, the coward he is, says that Robin is dangerous and she needs to be completely eradicated, but ultimately it starts getting too dangerous and dicey, and he goes, "Screw it, I just need to live." So he runs off. And the others continue to try to save all the books in the library, even under this hellfire. And like I said, in the midst of all this, the mother and daughter, are able to have this embrace. They hug, and it's one of my favorite panels in all of One Piece. They finally find each other, and it's horrible. It leads to such trauma for Robin, and it's the worst of circumstances for them to embrace in. But in this moment, at least, they had each other. And that must have been some small solace for both of them before things went completely wrong. But what I love here is that Olvia says to Robin that she's so proud of her for becoming an archaeologist. Even the scholars who celebrated her and said that how great that you become one, ultimately there was a bit of a negative connotation with it, saying you can't do this because it's too dangerous for you. Obviously they cared for her. And they were doing this for her own good, so nothing against them in that way, but Robin would do this amazing feat, and it would be met with, "Oh, she's a freak," by the horrible people on the island, or, keep that from everyone else, from the scholars, after, of course, initially celebrating it. But here, it's completely embraced by Olvia. "You've done so well. That's amazing." Embracing her and all that she is and her passions, and saying, "You don't need to hide that." The circumstances allowed for it, of course, but I'm just so glad that Robin was able to have that from her mother, from the person she needed to hear that from the most. Just complete validation, complete just embracing of who Robin had become. No need to hide that. No need to hide who you are, because it's all wonderful. Kind of similar to how the crew embrace all that Robin is at the present time. It's great, it encourages her passion. There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn about the world. It's a beautiful sentiment, and it makes Olvia unique, I think. And then Saul finally makes his way over to Robin and to Olvia, and Olvia recognizes him, for reasons we'll see in a minute. And Olvia says to Robin, "This info, this history must be passed on. All that we stand for must be passed on." O'Hara was never meant to expose history, it was to wield it and pass it on to future generations, because that's what it's for. Because it's vital for mankind's survival, and they can't give up on mankind's future. And determined, facing death, she says this. And it's once again something that links a lot of the Straw Hats, this theme of inherited will, of legacy, passing on from Olvia to Robin, as it did from Zeph to Sanji, as it did from Belmare to Nami, and Hira Look to Chopper, etc. Tom to Frankie as well. So now we see she fits in here beautifully. And Olvia here tells Saul to get out of here, and she tells Robin to run away. And she says, "You have to live," to Robin. And how sad is it, in response to seeing that Robin became this woman who just, her life was forfeit. She wanted to die. Given Olvia's words here, it's horrible. But this being here, I said it in the moment while I was reading this, the presence of this, "go on and live," this line being here was proof that her next step, the next step of her development, was to say that she does not want to die anymore, and not only that she wants to be here. And obviously I've read that part now, we've all read it, we all know what she says, but in the moment I was really excited and hyped, because I was going, she's gonna do it, she's gonna say it, and it's gonna be a watershed moment, and it was. But we see flashes of people throughout the island. Clover is just lamenting mankind. Olvia just looking downcast. Both of them knowing that it's over for them, but both passing their torch on through Robin. And then we flash back to 6 years ago once again, Saul and Olvia. And in the past, Saul was a vice admiral who was with the Navy, and he was in charge of similar operations from the Navy to O'Hara. And so here he captured Olvia, and he didn't believe that they were evil though, like the rest of his people did, his Navy did. And so he questioned her and wanted to understand. He was curious. And he learns, and they talked, and he saved her, and that's how she was the one survivor. And then he wasn't okay with the Navy's way of doing things, and so he abandoned them, and he left, and he defected. And that's why they were after him. And he is yet another good Navy person to add shades of gray to this horrible outfit that nonetheless has good people or decent people in it. Saul now, we have Smoker, we have Tashigi, we have another who is the ultimate shade of gray character, who, wow, what a great character this guy is, Kuzan, or Aokiji. Now, back in the present of the past flashback, Saul is holding onto Robin and cradling her and saying, "Your mom was a wonderful woman. O'Hara is noble, your mom is noble," and telling Robin that she must one day pass down O'Hara's history. And he says to have pride in this, that theme, have pride in, your roots. And, this thing that might inherently to some people seem harmful, have pride in it because, again, it's down to intent. You guys know. And he essentially just rages and says he doesn't care about anything anymore. He doesn't know about what justice is, he doesn't care. He just wants to protect his friend. Very similar to how Luffy and the Straw Hats think. And against his former comrades, against the Navy, he lifts their boat up, and he defends and fights the military. Robin looks on in tears, and Saul just tells her to get onto the evac ship, and the scholars are continuing to try to get rid of the flames and save all the books, and it's just horrible. And Robin tries to make her way onto the ship, but she is at first told, like, no, she's the daughter of this woman, and she's this freak, she's this monster, don't let her on. One sensible man on the ship says, no, like, reach out to her, but they can't reach her, and so she extends her hands, and they're all scared and repulsed by it, in such, again, an encapsulation of her childhood. Called a monster, called repulsive, shunned, for such inhumane reasons. They're scared of her, they don't understand her, and they make no effort to understand her, not like the Straw Hats do. And you see these scenes, this trauma, and it's no wonder she looks at the Buster Call as horrible as it is. It's no wonder that she thinks of trusting in other people as this thing that she's so hesitant to do. CP9 and Spandine go after Robin, and Saul defends her, and eventually Aokiji comes in, and he says that this needs to be done for the world's justice. He seems to be following that creed, but he says something that's much more open-minded, interestingly, than a lot of his Navy counterparts. He says that justice depends on one's viewpoint, and so he won't criticize Saul's justice, which is, that's essentially the theme encapsulated. What justice is very nebulous. It depends on one's viewpoint. And so he won't criticize Saul's, but he says, I can't let it interfere with mine. And then, in the middle of this, the evacuation ship is set ablaze. And Saul is horrified, Robin's horrified, and Aokiji is not a fan of this at all. He had no idea this was going on. He says he never wanted this to happen. And Aokiji is one of the most interesting characters in the story at this point. His sense of morality and how he has his own sense of justice and his own creed that he answers to and his own principles, and he doesn't approve of what the higher-ups do. I believe it was Sakazuki who destroyed or made the call to destroy the evac ship to just completely eradicate it from the roots. No chance of any survival. And Aokiji detested this. It's so interesting what is going on with his sense of morals, or he seems to have a very keen sense of what he wants out of life and what he thinks justice is. And he has a very flexible and adaptable and wide perspective on life. It's just that there are some things that are absolute and some things that must be upholded. I don't know, I want to learn more and more about Aokiji. I think he's amazing, he's very interesting, and one of the biggest character hooks for me. But he still has to get rid of Saul, unfortunately. And so Saul is frozen, he's slowly, completely frozen, and Saul tells Robin to escape on his ship as this is happening. and he says to her, "You may feel lonely, but one day you'll have friends. No one is ever born into this world alone." And it's beautiful, and he laughs his laugh, and he tells her to laugh. And, I mean, I don't think there's much of a question. It seems like he's frozen to death here, as Robin is told to go find friends, to go escape, and to go live her life. And it's beautiful that he ended up being right. We see Clover, he again laments mankind's callousness. We see Olvia again, both of them accepting their death, it seems like. And then Aokiji says to Robin that justice drives people mad. And he says that he'll allow her to escape, and he wants to see what she makes of her life. And he says, "Begrudge me, begrudge whoever you wish, but be grateful for your life. This is something that was granted to you from Saul, from his sacrifice." And he says, "I'm not an ally, I'm a foe. And next time I see you, I will confront you, and you could die." Perhaps he felt duty-bound to kill her next time they met, which could have explained his demeanor on Long Ring Long Land. But this is why Robin fears him, because of what he did here, despite showing these interesting sides to him at the same time. He plays it very straight here. He says, everyone is dead, and it's up to you, your choice here. You could join them, but you will die if you go back. And Robin instead goes on this boat along this ice path made by Aokiji, and tries to laugh to herself. But she can't. She breaks down. She can't do it. Beautifully, it seems as though a bunch of books were salvaged by the people of Ohara. They were tossed into this lake to be preserved, which is their legacy. Robin then gets her bounty, and Spandine tries to chase her to wherever to apprehend her, but notices that the helm suddenly froze up. Wonder who did that. And notably, Aokiji doesn't seem overly fond of the fact that she has this bounty. But Robin essentially grows up, going from place to place, sometimes seeming to find a home, but ultimately it seems like every time she is betrayed or sold out in some way, or found by the Navy who continue to pursue her, she just has never been able to settle. This happened consistently her whole early life until she was 16. On the run, always, doing all that she can to respect her mother's wishes for her, to live. She ultimately ends up finding Crocodile, and he takes her in as part of Baroque works, and the rest is history. And that ends the flashback. You know, it's hard to say whether that or Skypia's is the best in the series, but it's definitely top two. In terms of character work, it is the best in the series, without a doubt. Skypia I love for what it does for the overall themes and the mythos of Skypia, and how it all comes together in terms of the plot. But Robin's, the ways in which it fills in the gaps and adds emotional context for her, undefeated. I keep saying this, but one of the peaks of One Piece. Robin in the present continues to tell Spandam, you can't use this Buster Call. And Robin ultimately opens up to the Straw Hats and says she wants to continue on with them, but she can't because she has this enemy that will not rest until they are taken out. And in order to help them, she needs to sacrifice herself. And she says that she's afraid she has this curse, that she will betray them over time. She's insecure about this. She feels like she carries that curse with them that Aokiji talked about before, that no matter where she goes, people are burdened by her and hurt by her. And she's scared of that. She doesn't want that to happen to these people that she cares about. But what does Luffy think about that? What does the crew think about that? We know that they think it's bullshit. They don't care about these curses. They spit in the face of anything like that, and they just want to get their friend back. I say as I start to get emotional here. In response to that, what does Luffy say? He tells Soga King, still thinking it's Soga King, to shoot down the flag, the world's government flag, on top the rampart. He tells Usopp, Soga King, shoot down that flag. And then without hesitation, without the slightest bit of hesitation, knowing what this means, because as a reminder, as you guys know, I don't have to remind you, but just to contextualize this, what you are doing by shooting down this flag is outright declaring war on the world government, and your face is being shown as the man who shot it down, who committed the deed that represented this defiance of the world government. You and your crew will be hunted down for this, but you as the face of this, of course he has a mask, but you know, that is what's going on here by shooting this down. You're declaring war against the world. But Usopp doesn't even hesitate. If it's for his friend, he'll do it without a second thought. And so he's never really left the Straw Hats. Not really. Not in spirit. And it's such a moment of camaraderie, togetherness. This is a brave warrior of the sea. And everyone is shocked by what they've done, by the symbol of what they've done. But the Straw Hats wouldn't have it any other way. They would tear the world apart for their friends. And the Straw Hats stay steadfast. And Luffy ultimately says to Robin, "Say it. Tell me you want to live. We have gone to the ends of the earth for you, because we believe this. And if you want us to leave, we will, but tell us to our face." But ultimately, he knows that's not the case. So he says, "Say what I already know. Say it." And Robin thinks to herself, reflecting on her entire life, I didn't think that I could wish for that. She didn't think that it was okay, it was possible for her to wish to live, despite what her mother told him. Because it's been drilled into her so much, this poor woman, that her existence is a crime. But no, through Frankie, through the Straw Hats and their kindness and their togetherness, and all that they've done just for her, they show that it's okay. Embrace us back. Embrace life. You can have all that you want. This is a world that will allow you to do that if you're determined enough, if you grasp your dream. As Luffy showed everyone in Skypiea, the same sentiment here. And he just begs her, embrace this. You can do it. And she thinks, if it's really okay for me to make this wish, okay. And she says it. I want to live. Take me to sea with you. And Frankie is sobbing. He played such a huge role here. Usopp is trembling with excitement, knowing what he's done, and not scared about it, but the adrenaline coursing through him as this means that their friend is finally coming home. Lucci has this maniacal grin, and Luffy, in response to what Robin says, goes, "Perfect. Let's do it. Let's go." And that is where we end. Unbelievable content. Unreal. Not even just this apex and this backstory, but the way that it's such a rollicking thriller, as the Straw Hats and Luffy just completely, with this head of steam, show everyone what they can do through sheer force of will and strength, and a desire to protect their friend's dreams, and a desire to save their friend's life. It's very symbolic, very metaphorical, amazing character moments throughout, but for me, Luffy, Usopp, and Robin steal the show so far. I've read past this a little bit, but I haven't finished the arc, and I can't wait to see how it goes and how it all concludes. And we'll talk about it next time. This was an amazing start to Enies Lobby, and like I say, I think it's all one continuous arc, so it's not really much of a division, but you get what I mean. Again, when it comes to conclusive themes and all of that, I think it's carrying forward a lot of what we said with the addition of that element of the sacred, the sanctity of history and all that. That's an additional thing here, but the ways in which it coalesces in the ways I described, and a lot of interesting character foils, like, Spandam and how he's an antithesis, it's executed in all sorts of different ways, and the themes are enriched so effectively in this way, and it's just done really well. But yeah, we're gonna end it right here. Chapter 398. In the next video, Enies Lobby Part 2, Enies Lobby Finale, we will be covering the end of this saga. And I hope you'll join me for that. If you want to see it right now, you want early access to that review right now, you can do so through becoming a patron. For anyone who wants to watch that right now, I can't wait for that. So hopefully you enjoy this and that video as well, whether you get early access or whether you just watch it when it comes out on YouTube. If you would like to join in on my Twitch streams, you can follow me on Twitch. Link is in the description and pinned comment, where I read every single chapter live on stream, and it's always a wonderful time. Occasional episode watch-alongs as well. Keep up to date on my Discord for schedules for that, or you can ask me about it in the comments or on Twitch as well. But yeah, I don't have any character rankings. I don't really have much of a conclusive thematic statement aside from what I already said. I just can't wait to talk about the next part of this arc, and I hope you'll join me. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.